Over the many years of the internet's existence, there have been many people to come in and out of the spotlight. The ones I want to talk about today may be familiar to you if you were any flavor of emo or scene back in the 2010s. Even if you don't know their names, you probably know them from their iconic pictures like this or this one. Have you ever wondered who these two twins are? Well, they have a backstory that goes deeper than you might have imagined. This is the story of the emo twin Instagram singers Jessa and Gwyn Furches and their fall from grace. Jessa and Gwyn Furches were born on November 27, 1996 in Greensboro, North Carolina. From the age of 4, they discovered their love of the spotlight when they started doing community theater. The main production they starred in over the years was The Wizard of Oz, where the two would play the role of the gatekeeper, a role that's normally for one person, but was split between the two where they would stand and walk in unison. This clever and admittedly adorable way of splitting the role was a hit with audiences, which helped the twins to realize their calling in music. However, this would prove to be more difficult for them than for most people, as both twins were born with cystic fibrosis, a genetic disease that causes mucus in the lungs and ultimately impacts other organs in the body, like the pancreas and the liver. In turn, these affect the body's ability to absorb food and nutrients and can block airways and affect one's ability to breathe. This can make talking and singing a challenge for those with cystic fibrosis. In Jessa's words, quote, "My lungs love me enough to let me sing," and both her and Gwyn were not about to let cystic fibrosis get in the way of their dreams. Ultimately, CF wouldn't be the only struggle the twins would go through before reaching social media stardom. When the twins were just 10 years old, their father left them, seemingly out of nowhere. According to Jessa, it was just a normal day. He kissed their mother goodbye in the morning and dropped the twins off at school like usual. Their mother originally had an out-of-town doctor's appointment that day, but it ended up being canceled, unbeknownst to their father, who was banking on them not being around to execute his plan. His master plan was busted once the moving trucks began to show up. And yes, that's trucks, plural, as he planned on taking everything in the house with him. Fortunately, he ended up only leaving with one box of personal belongings after the cops were called, and he ended up disowning the twins, leaving their mother to raise and support 2 children with chronic illness by herself. As for why he would do this, they still don't know, but Jessa stated that they learned later on in their lives that their father became addicted to oxycodone after a procedure, which ended up heavily changing his personality. Unfortunately, addiction is a recurring topic in this story. While in middle and high school, Jessa and Gwyn were tormented by bullies, a good chunk of the bullying centering around their bodies. Remember when I mentioned earlier that CF could cause problems with absorbing food and nutrients? This made the twins pretty skinny for their age, and out of their control. But as we all know, kids are cruel, so that wouldn't stop the insults of flat-chested, flat-assed, too skinny, and the ever-so-creative ugly from being hurled at them daily. Jessa in particular was bullied for loving Michael Jackson, someone who she still to this day looks up to as an inspiration for his resilience and talent, among other traits. She discovered Michael Jackson and his music through their mother after she had Jessa listen to Thriller. When things got tough for her, she had a closet of Michael Jackson posters that served as a safe space for her. In an interview, she stated, quote, "I'd cry by his posters, and my mother would hold me, and with tears in her eyes, she'd say, 'Listen to Michael, keep the faith.'" The twins would switch schools in the 8th grade in hopes of stopping the bullying, but this unfortunately didn't work. Jessa and Gwyn at one point actually faked a fight with one another during their gym class just so they could be suspended and taken out of school. As an escape, the twins would turn to the internet to find community. Jessa and Gwyn started uploading to YouTube around 2011, with the earliest upload I can find being from August 13th, 2011, when they were 14 years old. They would upload covers of songs like Price Tag by Jessie J, Skyscraper by Demi Lovato, and Whatever Happens by, of course, Michael Jackson. Their first video that really started to take off was a video they made about their story with cystic fibrosis, which was uploaded May 7th, 2012, and boy, can you tell is this from 2012. In the video, they mentioned some of the treatments they have to do, such as taking pills with everything they eat. And keep in mind, this was in the days before the movies such as 5 Feet Apart, so this was their way of raising awareness about their condition in a time where it just wasn't in the public consciousness yet. This was the video that would send their YouTube career on an upswing, and by 2015, they ended up reaching 100,000 subscribers. They also had quite the following on Instagram, where between all their accounts, they reached a combined 900,000 followers over the years. If you had a username to the effect of Piercing Sirens, or Follow at the Chemical Panic, or if either of these pictures trigger your fight or flight, You probably have seen some of the Furches twins' pictures throughout the years. They would make these really sweet, inspirational pictures and different ones that were also very much of their time. Followers of the twins loved their positive messages and would tell them how much their content inspired them, and the twins would interact a ton with their fans, mostly over frequent YouNow streams, which, I don't know if y'all remember YouNow, but that was where, between that and like Stickam, that could be a whole nother video in of itself. Overall, they built up a really sweet and supportive community. Along with growing a fan base, their uploads of singing videos led to the twins being signed to North Carolina's whateva Records in 2015. CBS WFMY News 2, their local news station, actually interviewed Jessa and Gwyn back in November of 2015, where they discussed their challenges with CF, bullies, and their goal to spread positivity and inspire others. Which, also, complete side rant, but the website that it was on, it was like I get it was kind of like an older article, like this was from like 10 years ago at this point. It was full of broken JPEGs and typos, which you would think for like a news organization, whatever. But the worst sin this website had committed is they're one of those websites that when you go to like move your cursor up to like your tabs, like the top of your page, it pops up with like a, oh, before you go, and like 3 other news articles. I hate modern web design. That is one of the many things that will make me never visit a website again. And I feel like I should do a video solely on modern web design because I hate it so much. Okay, rant over. The Furches twins would enjoy their success on social media and even release some music, something they've wanted to do their whole lives. While it seemed like they had it all at that point, naturally, like most people on social media, there was a dark storm brewing behind the scenes. By 2019, both Gwyn and Jessa had been addicted to cocaine for about 4 years at that point. This addiction would hit them pretty hard, but Gwyn struggled more than her sister. In addition to cocaine, Gwyn would also become addicted to her painkillers that she took for her cystic fibrosis-related arthritis. This took a toll on the twins. At the time, they were live streaming daily, and according to Jessa, she would have to stop the broadcast at times because Gwyn was very clearly out of it, in an attempt to help Gwyn and to avoid worrying their followers. Gwyn would also pick at her face as well, with Jessa having to, quote, confiscate the tweezers from her because she would spend hours picking at her face. Eventually, this all boiled over on May 30th, 2019. That night, Gwyn was with Jessa and Jessa's girlfriend at the time and ran out of cocaine at some point that night. Gwyn mentioned leaving the house to go and buy more, but Jessa would stop this initial attempt by telling her she was in no place to drive. Especially as she already had her license revoked due to a previous DWI, where she was told at the time by the prosecutor that if she continued to drive under the influence that she was, quote, going to kill someone. This would be an awful foreshadowing of the night of May of 2019. While Jessa believed she had gotten through to Gwyn, she and her girlfriend would spend the later part of the night in Jessa's bedroom. Gwyn took this moment to take Jessa's keys from the coffee table, where she would take Jessa's car to head out on the road. While driving down East City Boulevard in Greensboro, North Carolina, Gwyn Furches swerved off the road, striking 72-year-old Elijah Edward Coppage, who was walking and thus fully unprotected from the car hurtling towards him. She had also crashed through a wooden fence. The resident of the house that owned the wooden fence would hear the chaos outside and call 911, and in the midst of it all, didn't even notice Coppage in the wreckage. Gwyn was ultimately arrested and tried to convince law enforcement that she was Jessa, something that she also tried to do during her 2018 DWI. Gwyn was sentenced to 10 years and 5 months in prison with a projected release date of May 16, 2028, with her 168 days of jail time during the trial being credited towards her sentence. Now, as previously mentioned, this 2019 incident, which in my opinion is too light of a word for what it truly was, but this was not Gwyn's first brush with the law and not even her first DWI as mentioned before. Both her and Jessa had a combined 7 crashes and 3 DWIs between the years of 2015 and 2019 alone. On March 13th, 2015, Gwyn was driving a 1996 Oldsmobile registered to their mother Jamie when she rear-ended another vehicle after, quote, looking down at her phone's GPS for a moment. Fast forward a little under a year later, on February 24th, 2016, a 1992 Chrysler owned by Jessa was being driven by Gwyn, who had ran a red light and hit a car, causing the car to spin out and hit another vehicle. November 23rd, 2017, a 2004 Toyota Camry, being both driven and owned by Jessa, struck a bicyclist who, according to Jessa, had, quote, suddenly merged in front of her, but the cyclist said he was going straight ahead and wasn't in front of her car when it hit him. No charges seem to have been filed as a result of this case. February and November seem to not be great months for the twins, as in 2018, there were 2 other incidents in those 2 months. The day before Valentine's Day 2018, Gwyn swerved off I-85 southbound, hitting a tree while under the influence, and this was the DWI where Gwyn was warned about the possibility of killing somebody. Exactly 9 months later, on November 13th, 2018, the same 2007 Chevy Impala that would be driven by Gwyn during the murder of Elijah Coppage, being owned and driven by Jessa in this incident, hit and ran a parked car. Insurance was exchanged between Jessa and the owner of the parked car, but no charges seem to have been filed as a result of this case. Can we just say how easy these twins have been getting off so far? Like, Jessa's hit two people, or at least their vehicles, in some form. They don't file charges against her. Like, that is some kind of luck. I don't know if you want to call it luck. Maybe that's not the appropriate term here. In the final incident before the murder, Jessa was scheduled to appear in court on charges of driving while impaired and failure to reduce speed, and was arrested on these charges on March 11th, 2019. While Gwyn has been serving her sentence, Jessa has continued to have an online presence and still has a very decent-sized following to this day. She has, as of the day of me writing this script, May 14th, 2025, she has 186,000 followers on Instagram and around 2,500 subscribers on her personal YouTube page, with her most recent upload being from 6 months ago. She continues to write and release music, which she releases unsigned after being ghosted by Othaz Records after Gwyn's 2019 arrest. Jessa also went on to start an OnlyFans account about 4 to 6 months after an abusive ex leaked her nudes and fake pages began to sell them, which she did to, quote, take her body back. So Jessa's been keeping busy over the years. She unfortunately would relapse on cocaine for about 1.5 years after her sister went to prison, but seems to be clean today, which I genuinely hope she is. Gwyn, during her time in prison, however, hasn't necessarily been staying clean herself. Between 2022 and 2025, she would have 30 infractions while in prison, with the most recent being from April 26th of this year for the sale/misuse of medication. 11 of these 30 infractions were substance related, with 9 of those being possession and the other 2 being sale/misuse of medication. Jessa and Gwyn found time to stay in touch with each other while Gwyn was behind bars and had a short-lived podcast called Twin Talk. Over the course of a little over 2 weeks, 3 episodes of Twin Talk would be released, with each only being around 10 minutes long, probably due to time restrictions that Gwyn might have for her phone calls while in prison. So, without further ado, because you don't think I was just gonna gloss over them, no. Without further ado, here's a rundown of each episode of Twin Talk. Episode 1. Gwyn Speaks from Behind Bars. This was uploaded May 2nd, 2023, where Gwyn mentions she hasn't been online in 4 years, bringing it back to her 2019 imprisonment. So she's about 4-ish years into her sentence at this point. She reflects on her May 2019 homicide, calling it, quote, the worst mistake I have made in my life to date. Selfish, irrational, and fearless. That ended up costing someone their life. Which, I don't know if that's an exact quote, because I don't know if she said fearless in it or another word, but the shitty prison mic phone quality was not the best, so that was my interpretation of what she said. I'm 90% sure, but also I have bad hearing. In a bold take, Gwyn says that maybe she's still here to inspire people after spending years questioning why she survived and her victim didn't. That is a take. She mentions getting sober while in prison and hopes she can get a chance to change the future as she is unable to change the past. Gwyn says she prays for everyone involved to heal and find peace, and then the twins talk about doing Twin Talk Tuesday about prison life, updates on Gwyn's health in prison, and updates on how we feel about what's going on in the world and what's important these days. Episode 2. Gwyn Got in Trouble. Jessa seems to talk over Gwyn a lot in this episode. Let me just say that right off the bat. I was watching it and I was like, But apparently, the Gwyn got in trouble episode seems to just be about Gwyn getting in trouble for stealing toilet paper, as the prison she's in only allows 1 roll per inmate per week, which, having CF can lead to digestive issues, which isn't necessarily the best for someone in her situation. Then we get a pretty awkward transition around the 4-minute 40-second mark, where Gwyn and Jessa go from talking about toilet paper to an immediate shift of, and this is a direct quote,
"We're going to dive into a more serious note on our opinions of what's going on in the country right now and what's going on with the trans community being targeted."
What? Like, it's the most like sure, we can talk about that, but the transition, I can't. It was the transition or lack thereof. There's a joke in there somewhere. They then have commentary on the Bud Light / Dylan Mulvaney situation, and at the 5-minute 49-second mark, Gwyn makes a comment and Jessa is silent for a few seconds before seemingly to ignore what Gwyn said and just moving on, which I kind of found funny. Then there is a chaotic swing about talking about gun violence with very lukewarm takes. Like, they're not bad takes, but they're very like, you know, if a school gets shot up, like a Democrat, with the most centrist Democrat you know is going to tweet that out, you know, but they're not bad takes. And then there is a sudden abrupt ending where one of them suddenly just says, "We're out of time," after 9 minutes. Which, again, could be due to the fact that Gwyn has a time limit due to being in prison. And then there's about 30 seconds of silence after saying their goodbyes when Gwyn randomly starts talking again at the 9-minute and 35-second mark, and then the episode ends. The third and final episode of Twin Talk is Q&A with Gwyn. In this video, Gwyn talks about how Jessa, her mom, and her friends inspire her to keep going, along with listening to Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. When asked about how she stays up to date on current events while in prison, she says that they have tablets in the prison that they get to use for a few hours a day. They have a news app to stay updated, they get to watch movies and play games on these tablets. When discussing her health, her lung function has been as low as in the 50s and as high as in the 70s during her sentence, and she has grown a bacteria in her lungs from not having sanitized nebulizer cups, which is part of a CF treatment, is using nebulizer cups. She says she gets new ones once a month, which, if you don't know anything, that is a long time to go without a new nebulizer cup. And Gwyn needs to rinse out her nebulizer cups to the best of her abilities, and her doctors are trying to push the prison to cooperate with her health needs. One of my favorite questions that Jessa asks is, "How are you coping with the accident now that you're in prison?" Like, I appreciate there's like no sugarcoating, but also calling it an accident. Like, yes, it was an accident, but also, I digress. In response to this question, Gwyn says, "It makes me sick to think about it, that I did this and I'm the reason someone is no longer here, but if I think about it too long, I just feel so disgusted with myself. It's hard to deal with sometimes." She still sings and writes music in prison and even performed in her prison's talent show, but she says she feels wrong singing without Jessa. She says the officers in the prison have actually called their families and would have Gwyn sing to their families on the phone because of her voice. And this is brought up by Jessa going, "Didn't an officer have you sing to his grandmother?" And then she starts bringing up other stories of, "Didn't this officer ask you to sing? Didn't this officer sing a song because she knew you were gonna sing it too?" Like, it's very... She's got a good voice, she's got some pipes, but they come from the era of Tumblr, you know, the everyone clapped, so I don't know how much I'm believing it, but, you know. But also, it doesn't matter if I believe it or not. Jessa asks Gwyn how she's coping without her twin, and Jessa immediately takes over the convo, saying how hard it is for her and how lonely she feels without Gwyn, and how it's, quote, the most horrible experience in her life. Then there's another awkward-ass outro, and this was uploaded on May 17th, 2023, and there have been no Twin Talk Tuesdays since. And speaking of awkward-ass outros, that brings us up to speed on the story of the Furches twins. I was a fan of them back in the day, and I'd kind of forgotten about them until recently when they popped into my head, and I decided to look them up to see what they were up to, and yeah, I was pretty shocked to say the least. So did any of you guys remember the Furches twins, and did you know anything about their history before this video? let me know. Also, if there's any other niche creators, emo or otherwise, that you want me to cover the history of, shoot me a recommendation. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and or subscribing. It does mean a lot. And if there's any other topics you'd like to see a video on, let me know and I might cover it. Thank you so much for checking this video and my channel out, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!